Yes, thanks a lot for having me here, Dan. So my name is Facundo. I'm originally from Argentina. I started my career in consulting and investment banking operations quite some years ago. And then around 2015, I switched to the innovation world, startup world. I supported in building several startups, I work in different types of projects and products, some in software. Most of my time is spent in biotech startup. And then I switched over during the pandemic to full product management of digital products. And right now I am working at TrueNode, a product studio, as a head of product.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you today about product validation. So for those who don't know, give us a quick overview of what is feature validation in product management.
Yes. So my first touch point with validation was actually when I was building pitch decks for fundraising for startups. And you may say, okay, what is the association? The point here is that venture capitalists look a lot about what they may call traction, what you may call, what evidence you have that your product is great. And here they really emphasizing, how many users, what is your user base? Is it growing? Is there a market for it? Really breaking down early stage into two main questions. Can you build it, like from a feasibility standpoint? And can you sell it? Like, is there a demand for it? And what I found is that my mentality and validation was, comes very strong from that side. So I'm always thinking, like, if I had to, even though I'm not currently working with venture capitalists to fundraise, I always have that mentality. Like, if I was to pitch this to a VC and they would ask to see my metrics, could I convince them?
Right.
And that's kind of the mentality that I come in. And when you relate it to product itself, it goes maybe a little bit more tangibly to something like, let's say you have a landing page and that you want to see, hey, I want to change something as maybe basic as the CTA, as the call to action. Say, well, I have an idea that if we change the button from sign up to sign up now, we will have higher conversion. And then you go into, okay, but why do you think that? And then you start looking at the evidence. Maybe you look at what other websites are doing, what are the competitors, and then you start collecting data to then show really if your idea was really successful or not. So does this change in the call to action really have that ideal outcome that you're looking for? So that is kind of going from validating an entire venture startup to really going to a specific feature. But I always try to tackle with the same mentality,
Yeah.
like how much evidence do I have for that?
So there's kind of two sides there. The first one is this desirability and feasibility. Can we build it? And if we do, does anyone care? Do people want it? So I guess from that side, it's more of a user research, market research kind of approach. And then the other side, which is you're saying you use the same mentality, but this is more like of the day-to-day stuff, like should we A/B test this button and see which one moves? But they're both under this umbrella of validation.
Yes, I see it more as a scale than really as a different item. So maybe you start with like something like, do I think it's a good idea? Maybe from personal experience, conviction. Then you share it with the team. Then maybe you look at something like Hotjar, you look at analytics, and you see what is where you're losing users. Then you look at competitors, and each step is, in my view, more higher impact evidence. And then you go into, okay, let's do some interviews. Let's interview 15 people, 20 people. What do they say? And then you do A/B testing and you try it with 500 people. And you increase that level. And the ultimate validation, in my opinion, is where you have something and you have the data supporting that decision. So let's say in this case of the landing page, you change the CTA and you say, actually, from those users that saw it, we saw a 50% increase in conversion, given all other factors are the same. Of course, you only change that one item, not other items. So I see it more as a scale. And for those that are interested in getting some frameworks around that, I think we can share some frameworks in the link.
Sure.
One of them is from an ex Google product manager that scaled Gmail, and his name is Itamar, and he's got some very nice frameworks about product management and experimentation in general. And what I really try to use is this, what he calls a confidence meter, to see like how much validation really do you have. And I really like this framework, so I recommend people check it out.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question there. So how do you decide when a feature or an element is validated? I mean, you mentioned there, just as an example, you said, you know, we interview 15 people and we see a pattern in 8 of them, so we consider that validation. Is it always fluid, or are there any kind of rules of thumb that you go by when you're validating a specific feature?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think if you have enough data, so we have really like where you're going into hundreds or maybe thousands of users, and you have really narrowed the scope of the validation between 2 small items, then if you have a background in data science or analytics, then of course you can do your own statistical analysis. You know, you can choose whatever the appropriate tests for this experiment. But if you don't, there are plenty of tools out there. You can Google something like A/B testing calculator, or is my product statistically significant? And then you can have frameworks where it tells you to input the data, and you can see, hey, is my result significant or not? And so I don't come from a data science background. I did have a lot of statistics in during my financial education, but so it helps me interpret. But definitely, like, those tools just make it really easy to say, hey, it's significant or not significant, and I think makes life a lot easier.
Okay, so then my next question, which might be, we both might be slightly biased towards though, do you think that a background in data knowledge, or even like some additional learning in data science or data analytics, makes for a better PM? Or do you think that with all of these new tools that you've mentioned now, it's you know, almost a choice that every PM gets to make?
Yeah,
it's think, like the question of, do I have to be good at maths to be a coder? It's like, no, but it helps, right? So
yeah, of course. And I think, you know, there are definitely some roles where being a data scientist, it's almost necessary. I would say it's not a blanket rule. I wouldn't say that all product managers need to be amazing at data science, but I would say that having the capacity to understand what the tools are doing, having the capacity to really assess and plan experiments, that, you know, you don't kind of do an A/B test and then, you know, 2 weeks later you input into the analysis and says, oh, by the way, it's not significant. So being able to plan for it being significant and really understanding the basics of certain statistical tests definitely helps. And it's something that I believe you don't have to, you know, go to university for. You can learn about it, test it, and experiment. So in general, as a blanket rule, no, but it definitely helps to understand the principles. And if you have people that are good at that if you learn from them and really try to understand how they approach it, definitely it's a super value added. And I think what I've seen is that the expectation is, as you grow in seniority, that data understanding is really key. It's really well valued. It's like, what are you basing your product decisions on? Data. Okay, where do you get the data? How do you interpret it? And how are you able to convey that to your stakeholders?